Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today, we're going all the way back to the beautiful land of the living skies in Saskatchewan. Brit, Dort, CTV reporter in Regina, is our guest today. Brit, I'm glad to talk with you. I always enjoy conversation with friendly Saskatchewan folk, and you have found your way back to your home in Saskatchewan with your new job as a CTV sports reporter in Regina.
Well, thanks so much. I've never done a podcast before, so this is, it's weird, and I'm always so used to asking the questions, so this is going to be weird to have you ask them to me, but I'm really excited, so thanks for having me.
Well, let's get started. So first, I want to ask you a bit about what got you into sports reporting and broadcasting, because I know you went to Mount Royal. You also studied a bit at Medicine Hat College, but you are originally from Saskatchewan. And I know that when it comes to people like us who are originally from the prairies, that there's not as many opportunities for education, quote unquote, when it comes to sports broadcasting. So I want to ask you, what made you go study in Alberta? And before that, what was the thing that inspired you to get into sports reporting, journalism, and broadcasting?
Well, I was very fortunate. So I grew up in a small town in Southwest Saskatchewan of about 400 people called Fox Valley. But when I was a teenager, my whole family moved to Medicine Hat in Alberta. So I kind of feel like I did spend 10 years in Alberta, but I've spent more than that in Saskatchewan. So I kind of consider myself both a Saskatchewanian and a little bit of an Albertan. So that's kind of why I started my education at just Medicine Hat College. When I was out of high school, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I kind of switched my major like 3 or 4 times before I really knew what I wanted. I was just young, and we were kind of talking about this at work today about what 18-year-old really does know what they want to go into. And once I got into broadcasting and broadcast journalism, I remember thinking, how did I not think about this from the start? But it was kind of just the classic, you're in high school, okay, do I want to be a nurse or do I want to be a teacher? Or just all the mainstream, I felt like, jobs in college that you would go into in programs. And so I really didn't think about broadcast journalism or communications or really anything until I just kind of took a little bit of time off from school. I did my first year of college. I didn't like it. I didn't like the program I was in. And so I had to have a lot of conversations and a lot of research. And the only thing that would kind of spark joy in me or would kind of give me butterflies when I'd look at the program was broadcasting or public relations. I really wanted to go into PR and do sports in any form in that sense. And so those were the only two that I thought, okay, I actually want to do that because I'd want to do it for my whole life. And that's something I think millennials or the younger generations are really looking at now. It's okay. It's about being happy. It's not just about having a career. And so, yeah, I applied for them at Mount Royal University. I'd actually already been going to Mount Royal because I just had been kind of in open studies at the time, figuring out what I was doing. And lo and behold, I got in, and I always knew the first day I walked into broadcasting that I was in the program to do something in sports. And it's never been about like being on camera or anything. I just always wanted to do something in sports, whether that was in writing, again, in communications. I just always knew that was my passion because sports has always been such a huge aspect of my life, my family's life. And it's the only thing that really, again, brings happiness to me because it's something that brings happiness to kind of everyone. And I wanted to be in an industry that could bring happiness to a lot of people.
You mentioned that it's something that's been with you for a long time. Were there any key memories from your youth or growing up that come to mind when you reflect back on how sports impacted you and inspired you to go down the path that you're on right now?
For sure. Like, I mean, I said, I grew up in a very sports-minded family. My dad and brother are absolute sports nuts. And I always felt like I vibed a little bit more with them on that sense. My sister's like, she's definitely just more the other side of things, even though she was extremely athletic as well. But I would say growing up in a small town in Saskatchewan really helped that. I find a lot of rural people are big sports nuts. I mean, we were so fortunate because we lived in a rural spot that we had access to the rink anytime we wanted to go. My dad was like in charge of the rink. So I would get up with him before school and go down and flood the ice with him, like riding the Zamboni. And we could skate anytime we wanted. On Christmas Day, if we wanted to go unlock the doors, we could go. And that was just kind of the thing. If in the winter, you were at the rink every day after school or before school, during school. In the summer, you were at the swimming pool or you were at the ball diamonds. You were always active because in a rural spot, that's all you have. You don't have anywhere to go, for entertainment. So that was our entertainment and I loved it. And my family was just diehard sports fans. So if we weren't out playing sports, we were at home watching sports because that was before you could watch highlights at any time you wanted or games or anything. So you were at home game time watching it. So I think that just played a role in always being involved in it and just always being around it.
What were the sports that you enjoyed playing the most in your youth?
I always laugh at this because I come from a huge hockey family and I did not end up being a hockey player. But I actually ended up being a gymnast. So it's really nothing to do with any of the sports that I will kind of cover now in my new position. But gymnastics was definitely my favorite sport, and it still is my favorite sport to watch, to pay attention to. I always tell people it's the hardest sport. I'm biased. And, I was somebody who, after I finished the sport, I coached in it for a number of years. So I mean, gymnastics is definitely number one, but baseball, I always loved baseball. I loved volleyball. Like I said, I wasn't good at hockey. So my siblings were good at hockey. They went on to go to kind of like Notre Dame and do that route. And I was definitely the one who didn't.
So then did you still watch hockey and enjoy being involved with the sport in some aspect, or was it you were just the outlier of your family completely?
I would say it's funny because my sister played hockey, but I was the one who was mostly interested in it. Like I've watched hockey since I was a young kid with my family, like I said, with my dad and my brother. And I've definitely continued that. That's always been a habit or something I've carried with me, when my dad would take us to Flames games, because that was the closest NHL venue, I guess, to us. So, as a kid, I remember that as much. And I'd be so excited, or even going to watch junior hockey and things like that. It's definitely always been in my veins. I guess I wasn't blessed with the hockey skills, but I feel like I have a little bit of the mindset for it.
So then, having said that, would the Calgary Flames be the team that you cheer for and support in hockey, or did you veer off the path a little bit and go rogue and not cheer for a Canadian team, or not cheer for a team in your home province?
Yeah, you know what? My dad picked all of his teams as a kid, I think, when they were all good, because it's kind of cursed us. He's a huge Philadelphia Flyers fan. And so basically we were born into a Flyers family, and I wouldn't have it any other way, as frustrating as it is. So yeah, we're huge Flyers fans. But the Flames have always held kind of a little spot in our heart because of the fact that they were the closest spot. And, my dad went to school in Calgary. I went to school in Calgary. My parents met in Calgary. So Calgary's always kind of held a little spot. We had a lot of family there. So Flames were just always an access point to us. And I mean, back in the day, they're in separate conferences, so that helped. And back in the day, the Flames and Flyers would only play each other once a season, but now obviously they travel back and forth and they have to play twice. So it was rare that you ever had to worry about the Flames and Flyers kind of being in a spot together. So I feel like we do have a little place in our heart for the Flames, but we're definitely diehard Flyers fans.
You must have some great and also some haunting memories from the 2009-2010 season then, if you are a big Flyers fan.
Yeah, it's probably the only season. It's even though it didn't end the way that obviously you would want it as a Flyers fan. It's the most memorable season and still my happiest season. Like, I still have a shirt that says like 2010 Eastern Conference champs, and I shouldn't wear it because it's not like they went on to win the cup. But I love that season. Simone Gagne is my all-time favorite Philadelphia Flyer, and he was incredible in that entire playoff run, but especially in the Bruins series when they came down from their 3-0 deficit. But yeah, that's amazing. My dad and brother actually went down to Philly for games 3 and 4 when they played Chicago. I was young. I was like 15, so I didn't get to go on the trip. But it's the best season, and I always worry that that's the only time that I'm going to experience a run like that. I mean, the last run they had before that was in 97, so I was 2 years old. And they got swept by Detroit that year, I'm pretty sure. So I wouldn't remember, but I do worry. I'm like, please, before I die, I just want to see one Stanley Cup. So that would be nice.
It's always unfortunate whenever these scenarios come up when you cheer for teams based on parental heritage or based on other obscure arbitrary reasons. And then you sit there and you have felt invested and you're like, well, if I leave now, then I've lost my integrity. But if I stay, then they're not going to win. So I don't know what's going on here. I feel so conflicted, and especially when it comes to Canadian teams too, like Winnipeg or Calgary. I mean, at least Calgary's won once. And then 2004, they came so close. I mean, both of us were super young kids. So not a hockey fan, and I wouldn't have had any memories of that. But I'm sure that if you cheer for the Flames, even a smidgen, that you've heard it was in 10,000 times since your youth.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, back to 2004 even too, the Flyers had a pretty deep run that year too. They were the ones who Tampa beat in the third round to go to the Stanley Cup final and beat the Flames. So I remember when Tampa beat the Flyers, I was like, well, at least like, hopefully the Flames can beat Tampa now. I remember thinking that. So same thing. That was a really deep run that I remembered kind of having a little bit of like heartstrings pulled on. But yeah, I agree. I feel like the number one thing in sports that people, not the number one, but one of the things people get frustrated in sports most about is the classic calling people like bandwagoners. Like, oh, you're such a bandwagoner. And I feel like I've cheered for teams that have just struggled my entire life. So, and people know what teams I cheer for because I am very loyal, that I'm like, you know what? The one thing I can say is I'll never be called a bandwagoner because people know that I've cheered for some crappy teams, especially this year. If you look at the Flyers, one of the worst teams in the league, but I'm still there. So
It's unfortunate because it almost seemed like a few years coming. It's funny you mentioned actually living in Calgary and loving the Flyers. I got more into following the NHL because a friend of mine who I met when I was studying in Calgary, who loves the Flames and the Flyers, knew so much about the NHL. And he taught me everything about the history and the stats and the players. So I started to grow a bit of an appreciation for the Flyers. And I was like, oh, I always want to see them do well. And I was saying to him actually earlier this year, I was like, well, unfortunately we could have seen this coming because they were good. And then they started to taper off. And eventually, like Detroit too, they were very good for such a long stretch. And then they bottomed out, and that it's just the resetting of the cycle. But just like the Flames, you know, they'll be back to the top eventually, maybe sooner than later, like teams like Arizona or Seattle or Anaheim, something like that. So maybe not all hope is lost, but it's been a little bit of time since they've had a real successful run.
Yes, it definitely has. And I'm just praying in my lifetime that it happens. We'll just give it that one. It may be a while till they rebuild. This season was really rough. This is one of the worst seasons I've experienced as a fan. So let's pray there's something on the horizon here.
I think that, if I'm not mistaken, another football team you cheer for sounds very similar to your home province Riders. It's the not Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders, if I'm correct. Is that also another byproduct of your father influencing your entire family's decision to cheer for an NFL team?
Absolutely, yes. He was a big, at the time, like Oakland Raiders fan, Los Angeles Raiders fan, and then now it's Vegas. And so, yeah, same thing. And I didn't feel like I really got into NFL football until way later in life. Like I would say I was even in college, like I always just called myself a Raiders fan, and I would watch the games if they were on TV, but I didn't really know much about them. And I think which actually did upset my dad and brother because they're such diehards. But I really got into NFL football, I would say the last like 4 or 5 years. And yeah, now I'm like, no wonder I didn't want to get into it, because same thing, very frustrating team to cheer for. Hopefully this season they look a little better. A couple good signings. We'll hope so. But
so of the teams then so the Raiders, the Riders, the Flyers, do you have an MLB team as well, or not really?
Yeah, this is the only team that I wasn't born into that I cheer for on my own. I'm actually a huge Phillies fan. I love Philadelphia in general. Like we're Sixers fans in my family, which is awesome. They just beat the Raptors in round 1, which has been awesome for us. That's a little payback from a couple of years ago.
Only a smidgen.
Yeah, I know. I was wincing last night after the first half. I was like, why is it this close? But we were good. But no, so I'm a Phillies fan, but my dad and brother are actually huge Reds fans. So it's whatever reason, it's the only team that I just said, no, I want to be a Philly fan pretty much through and through. We always joke we're closet Eagles fans because same thing, they're kind of like our Flames of the NFL. We don't really care if what they do. We kind of just like, yeah, if they do well, that's okay.
So what attracted you to cheering for the Phillies then, besides the fact you love Philadelphia? Like, was there something about the team, or was it like you saw the mascot and you're like, wow, like Philadelphia is known for their outrageous mascots, so I just have to jump on the bandwagon? Or I guess he would have been the original. He would have been there before Gritty. So maybe that was the initial inspiration for Gritty.
Yeah, the Philly fanatic. Could you imagine? No, I really can't tell you what attracted me most to the Phillies. I love Philadelphia as a city, and I love just how much players enjoy playing there. When you talk to any professional athlete, really, they have such great things to say about playing in Philly. And even though it kind of gets a bad rep sometimes for kind of its crazy fans, I still really enjoyed it. And like, for instance, I was watching a Phillies game the other day, and they had Bryce Harper mic'd up, and they were talking to him and just talking about how tough Philly fans can be to play for. And because, the Phillies had a little bit of a rough start to the season. And he kind of said, he's like, you know what, Philly fans are still the best. They let you know when you're not doing well, and they let you know when you are doing well. And he's like, I wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't want to play anywhere else. And I mean, Bryce Harper has seen success, and we saw him have great success in Washington. And it was so exciting when he signed with Philly a few years ago. And So to hear him say that when he's only been there for a few seasons, and I mean, 2 of them have been in a pandemic, I thought that was interesting. I feel like it's the city of brotherly love. Athletes love to play there, for the most part. I mean, maybe Ben Simmons would say different, but I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's just, again, I love the city of Philly. It's my dream to go to Philly and be able to catch as many sports as I can, hopefully cross over a little bit of MLB and NHL. It'd have to be MLB playoffs. So hopefully they go on a playoff run this year and I could go, but.
So then you haven't been to Philadelphia yet?
No, that is my dream. I always say it's my favorite city and I've never been there.
So are there any other things that compile into the Philadelphia departments then for you, or does the buck stop with sports?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know if I'd want a cheesesteak when I'm there. I know that's one of their classics. I'd like to go to the Liberty Bell. I'd like to go run the Rocky Steps. I don't know. I really feel like I would just feel at home there, as weird as that is. I don't know if I'd fit in, but I feel like I'd feel at home.
Do you watch the television show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
I should. I don't watch it. Every time I see it, I think I should probably watch this show. Maybe it would give me a little bit of a better picture of Philly too. I don't know.
I remember when the show first came out. I think it was in the mid to late 2000s, and it didn't start to become popular until after I'd already graduated from high school. And I know that my older brother had showed me the program, and he said, "Man, you got to watch the show. It's so funny." And I was like, "What? Like, what kind of name is this first show? Is that? That's kind of strange." And then when I started watching it, I realized, okay, if you're someone that appreciates good humor, especially if you're someone that enjoys sports teams from Philadelphia, it is a show that is very worth your while getting into. I don't know if you're a binger or not, whether you are or not. I think that it is a very strongly suggested show that you should watch in any spare time that you do have.
Okay, I promise you I will watch it because I've actually always wanted to. I don't know why I haven't. I feel like I just kind of always stick to my other shows, like my How I Met Your Mothers and Friends and things like that.
Well, I mean, those are also other very popular shows too. And Always Sunny is one that has now gained a similar popular or following in terms of popularity, but it wasn't always like that before. So I wouldn't blame you if you hadn't seen all your friends talking about it or watching it, because again, even when I knew people talking about it, it was like in the fringes of society. It wasn't really out in the open like it is now after it's had more than a decade run on television. So.
Okay, I promise it's on my list.
So of all the teams that you cheer for then, how would you rank the order of most meaningful championship wins?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I feel like because actually, okay, that's a lie. I was going to say most recent would be the Phillies back in 2008, but most recent, I grew up in a Riders family. So obviously 2013 would be the most recent championship then that I've experienced. And that one would be the most memorable because I was that much older. I was, I think, 18 in 2013. And my dad didn't take me to the game. He took my brother. So I still hold him accountable to that one. But I would say that one would definitely hold the biggest place, just because when you talk to anybody around here, and now that I'm in Regina and I work here, and with the fact that Regina is hosting Grey Cup for the first time since then this year, everybody is comparing it to 2013, and all you hear are stories from 2013, and I love hearing them. It was a little bit too in that age where social media wasn't as big yet. Social media was a thing. So I feel like people absorbed the moment so much more. And I love it. Hearing from my brother and my dad too, them being there and them experiencing it. I almost feel like I was there, and I just remember watching. And yeah, so I would say obviously the 2013 Grey Cup, which the amount of times when we would ask on the morning show that I anchor, your favorite sports moment in history, the amount of people who would answer and say the 2013 Grey Cup, everybody in Saskatchewan will remember that moment and talk about that game and talk about that run. I think until the day they die. Like, I think even if this year, if Saskatchewan won on home turf again, I still don't even think it could compare to 2013 as bad as, it probably could, but for some people it couldn't.
I think the reason why it couldn't is because of what led up to it. Maybe you can look at what the Riders have experienced the last 2 years and say, okay, yes, they lost in the West Final to the Bombers back-to-back years, which, first of all, they hadn't even played each other in a West Final since 1972 before the one in 2019. And then they lost at home, and some Bomber fans I know were saying, well, this makes up for 07. I'm like, not quite. You have to beat them in the Grey Cup for it to fully make up for it. But it was still amazing to actually be at nonetheless, because the atmosphere when the ball hit the crossbar was amazing for away fans, not so much for the home fans. And then the next year happens again. And if they were to actually overcome that and win the Grey Cup at home this year after beating the Bombers in the West Final, then it would be amazing and triumphant, but it doesn't compare to the 13th man. And then again, an exact rematch in the same province the next year, almost a year to the date, and then losing again. And then finally, some years later, they get back to the big game and then they win it all. And it's at home in the last possible time that it can ever be hosted in Old Mosaic. That's what I've heard from people around Saskatchewan, and especially a former guest on my podcast, Rob Vanstone, who I'm sure that you'll soon get to know very well, who he knows a few things about the Riders, like maybe 2 or 3, like 4's a stretch. So if you ask him, like that's what he would probably lean towards, but I think there's a justifiable reasoning for why 2013 will be so memorable for Riders fans.
I agree. And I agree with the old Mosaic too. I mean, new Mosaic's gorgeous. It's a beautiful stadium. They've pumped a lot into it. It's awesome to go to games in, but there was something about old Mosaic that your heart was in it. Saskatchewan was in it. And I don't know, it's a different feel going to new Mosaic even. And it's not necessarily bad. It's just different. And a lot of people don't like change. So I think the old Mosaic atmosphere does have a lot to do with it. Also, shout out to Rob Vanstone. He is awesome. He's an amazing human, and he knows everything and anything about the Riders if you need to know anything. And I agree. I was actually at the game in 2008 with the 13th man. So that was one of my first Rider games, I think. And my dad brought me to that Grey Cup. So maybe that's why he didn't bring me in 2013, because I was bad luck in 2008. So
are you going to do everything you can to avoid the Grey Cup this year then?
Yeah, we'll see what the results are. I was actually talking to the play-by-play voice for the Riders this week, and I asked him for a prediction. And he wouldn't give it. So I feel like I can't give any predictions of what will happen in 2020 in the Grey Cup. And I don't want to show my bias, because now that I'm in the sports role, I gotta play it fair and see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's part of the job, and it's understandable. You know, maybe deep down you don't tell anybody like you like seeing this play happen. But I think one of the things I've been told by professionals in the industry who are far older than we are is that you eventually start cheering for people. And I've started to see a bit of that. And I'm sure that you have too, when you start to tell the stories of people that are very well known or not very well known, that you start to become attached more to individual stories than necessarily the laundry that the team wears. You know, sorry for the Seinfeld reference, but
no, and I completely agree. And I mean, obviously being here in Regina, you do cover the Riders the most, so you get to know players. And I mean, just even from my previous position where you would interview players or former players and things like that, now obviously I'm more immersed in the team and getting to know them. And you know, somebody like Cody Fajardo is just an amazing human. You know, off the field, he is just an amazing guy. He's so nice. He takes the time for everybody. And so that's the same thing, like you're rooting for him. And he's somebody like this year when I was able to chat with him a couple weeks ago, just kind of teeing up this really important season. You know, he's talking about becoming a father for the first time. His wife's pregnant with their little son right now that's due in September. And he said his main goal this season is he wants to have his baby in a picture in the Grey Cup. Like that's his motivation to win Grey Cup. And it's like, how does that not pull at your heartstrings and not make you want to root for somebody like that? Because he's such a good human off the field, and on the field, I know he's an awesome teammate from, you know, guys saying that. So it's hard. Yeah. You want to root for somebody like that, but then I'm sure the quarterback on the other side could tell me a heartfelt story, and I'd be rooting for them too. So
that is true. I mean, literally the last 2 seasons, Zach Collaros, someone that was in Saskatchewan, someone that who people thought his career was gone to the grave and came back against all the odds. And also in the midst of becoming a father again, and just like the parallels are insane. And, you know, Cody Fajardo is someone who I think, you know, should be held with high regard in the eyes of all CFL fans, just outside of football, because of what a great person he is. And especially considering the expectations that were put on him when Collaros went down to now the expectations have inflated like crazy. And I think it's a little bit tough to understand, okay, this guy went from no one expected anything of him to everyone expects the world of him. So just give the man a break. He's doing pretty well. He'll be fine. And especially when it comes to Riders fans reflecting on the experiences they've had before this century, quarterbacking was a bit okay. Besides Ken Austin, there wasn't a whole whack of guys that were CFL All-Stars and lighting it up. And I think the Riders fans are very blessed to have seen a lot of most of their great history in more recent years unlike the Riders fans who would have been older than your parents, who had to wait an entire lifetime almost to see the first Grey Cup and then almost half another one to see the second. And for some, they had only seen two in many, many years. So the Riders fans are very fortunate to have someone like Cody Fajardo and also to have witnessed a lot of their successful history in the last like 15 years compared to when it took like 70 to see two Grey Cups.
Yes, I completely agree. It's amazing that I've been able to see two Grey Cups in my lifetime, like you said, and my dad was waiting a very long time to see them again in 07 there. And I agree, Collaros and Fajardo are both phenomenal quarterbacks, and they're going to do so much this season. I think what analysts are saying, this is kind of just going on the sports side of rant here, looking at those teams, I mean, you have said it right there. They're being relied on so heavily. Fans are looking to them to take these teams to another successful season, because I mean, the Bombers and the Riders are expected to be pretty decent this year, but it's right now everybody's worried, okay, what happens if Collaros or Fajardo go down? Because the backup situation right now for Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, it's going to be an interesting one, what they have teed up for the year.
I remember the last time Saskatchewan and Winnipeg had to rely on their backups, and with Winnipeg, it was just a glimpse of a game that was meaningless, but didn't look great. And the last time the Riders had to rely on a backup long-term was around the time that you were probably just starting college, when it was Tino Sinceri and I can't remember who the other person was that came into play, but Durant I think he had torn his Achilles in 2014, and Sinceri went in, and it was just, it was not a fun time. I mean, the Bombers too, they experienced the days of Brian Braum and Justin Goltz and Max Hall and Joey Elliott and 1,000 quarterbacks in a span of 4 years. So it doesn't look great. And I don't think the CFL is as fun when Winnipeg and Saskatchewan aren't good, even though financially maybe the league would say otherwise and they would want an Eastern team to be good like the Toronto Argonauts. But again, we'll have to wait for the season to start to see what goes down.
Yeah. And you know what? The Argos look pretty good this year too. So you know what? I feel like the 1, 2, 3 right there, those are probably going to be the 3 top squads in my prediction books this year. Other people could say otherwise, that's fine. But I do feel like the Argos are gonna do okay.
Of the other teams that you follow, if you had to make a choice, one of these other 3 teams will win a championship in the next 5 years, but the other 2 will not win for another 50. Which team would you choose to win a championship between the Flyers, Raiders, and the Phillies?
Oh, that's a good one. I feel like because the Phillies won in 08, that's okay. I can get rid of them. Oh, that's a really tough one. I feel like my dad and brother would be like, so I don't know what they would say, but I would probably say the Flyers, just because I don't want them to have the longest drought for not having a cup. I don't ever want that to experience that stat, because I know like Leafs fans, and when people say things to other, or the teams that have come into the league and haven't won a cup yet, just people always throw that stat at them, and I get annoyed by it, and being around hockey fans a lot more than maybe NFL fans. I would say Flyers. I really want to experience it. And I love hockey so much. And I love the traditions in hockey. I love the Stanley Cup. People call it the best trophy in sports. So I would say Flyers. I would have to see them win a championship, probably. Yeah, we'll go with them. The Raiders, it would be cool for a Super Bowl win. Don't get me wrong, but I'd be okay.
That's fair. And I think the Raiders, they've experienced not that much success recently. Maybe the Flyers have a little bit more, but I think that both teams have a pretty similar history of being really good in the 70s and then having a boomer generation of fans that hold on to memories from their childhood, now passed on to the kids like yourself. So it's kind of funny how those 2 teams actually have a pretty paralleled history when it comes to their success.
And that's why my brother gets mad at my dad. He always says, you picked the teams when they were good. And then it cursed us. So yes, hopefully they get a lot better. Maybe when I'm like 50 or something, God willing. Maybe
when you're the age of your dad and you have your own kids and you're like, oh, well, now this team is good, but then you can't veer them off the path and choose a team that's good in that moment, because then you're going to curse your kids for the next generation.
True. I agree. We'll see. I wouldn't ever if I had kids, I wouldn't probably let them choose their own teams either. I'd be like, just like my dad, where you're born into this family and you're going to be this fan.
100%. I mean, isn't that, you spend all that time and to have your son or daughter to decide to cheer for another team, like it would just be heartbreaking, unless there are always exceptions. And I think that those can fly too, but it's always great to see a family united over one team. And I think that's what makes sports exciting, is when you see families that come together and they're so happy when one team wins, or the opposite end, it's heartbreaking to see them upset when they lose. And I know, especially when it comes to Philadelphia families, the famous or infamous reaction of that family watching Kawhi hit the shot, and they're like freaking out. They're like, no, this can't be. And as a Raptors fan watching it, it's kind of comical, because you think like, man, this was the Raptors, the team that were made fun of by Charles Barkley. They're never going to win for 50 years. And all of a sudden this too good to be true run happens. But at the end of the day, I think Philly is probably going to win a championship again before the Raptors will. So maybe they got that going for them.
I guess you never know. That it taunts me, the bouncing on the rim before it goes in. I see that in my dreams, my nightmares, I guess.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, that would definitely be crushing to see as a fan on the opposite end. But I think there's a big sign outside of someone's house close to my neighborhood here, and it says, "The greater your storm, the brighter your rainbow." And I think that phrase can be applied to what happens with some sports teams, is the treachery they go through. Eventually, when it all comes together, it would be the greatest story ever. So Lions fans or Browns fans or Minnesota Timberwolves fans, whatever team you cheer for that struggled, when your day comes, it'll be the greatest day in your entire life.
I was going to say, and I feel like a few years ago when St. Louis won the Cup in, I think, 2019, they went from being last place to being Stanley Cup champions in the same season. And I think that's such a neat story. And I don't think people would have almost fallen in love with their story as much had they not been in last place in January and then ended up winning the Stanley Cup in June. So I think I agree. You have to have the storm in order to get the rainbows. And they really took that to account in 2019 and did it. So.
Well, the Flames and the Oilers both had very significant periods of struggling this year, more Edmonton. So does that mean that one of those two teams is going to finally shatter the long drought of no Canadian championships in the NHL?
You know what? We were talking about this the other day because the NHL playoff drafts are happening this weekend, and you're getting ready to pick your players and whatever, and you're trying to decide what team you think is going to go deep this year. And there's so much parity in the NHL, and that's why I love it so much. Because yeah, it doesn't matter. As long as you make playoffs, you have a chance at the Stanley Cup in the NHL. And that's what I love. And that was the year when Philly went on their run in 2010. It came down to the final game of the season against the Rangers that year for them to make playoffs. And it went to a shootout. It was the most stressful game. That was more stressful, I think, than watching them in playoffs. And they just proved it, being an 8th seed, making it all the way to the end. And you see that so much in the NHL. And so when I look at the playoff format this year and I look at the teams making it, and really all it takes is to make it in the playoffs. So we look at the Flames and they're awesome. They've had an unreal season, but realistically, the Battle of Alberta, you look at Edmonton, they play the Oilers, you could see how the Oilers could come out on top, because really there's rivalry. There's good players on both sides. I will say, I don't see the Oilers winning the Cup this year, and Oilers fans get mad at me just because I don't think they are really a playoff format team. The Flames, I can see them going on a deep run. Again, I don't actually see them winning the Cup this year either. I don't know who I see winning the Cup. Again, I don't see the Leafs winning the Cup. I really don't see a Canadian team winning this year, and maybe I'll eat my words in a couple months here, and that's fine. I mean, how many people could have predicted the last 3 years who won the Cup? I mean, who really? Exactly. Who would have thought Vegas would have went to the Cup final the first year they were in the league? Probably nobody. Who would have thought Montreal would be in the final last year? Probably nobody but Canadiens fans. So I don't know. I really don't know that a Canadian team will win. Florida looks really good. I think they could go on a deep run, but I also look at Carolina and I think they've had a lot of really good seasons where they've just fallen short. And I feel like they've got to get it done in this window where they're still a good team and it really have a good team camaraderie. So I don't know. Carolina maybe would be my pick this year. We'll see how that goes.
Okay. Well, I think it's Carolina's not a bad choice. What I've seen as someone who maybe doesn't follow hockey as much as you do, and I could be wrong on this, but every time that I see these teams like Carolina or Florida, and they come from nowhere or from years before, not like they were terrible last year and all of a sudden they sprouted out from the ground, but the teams that don't have as much playoff experience, who are really good in the regular season, and then they fall short or they don't do it in the playoffs. And I think that, especially when it comes to Florida, yes, they've won the President's Trophy, but how will that translate to the playoffs? I think a team like Boston, as much as I regret to say that because I don't like Boston teams at all, has a better chance of going farther in the playoffs because they've been there more times than anyone else. It's like, do the Golden State Warriors really need to be the first seed to go deep in the playoffs? No, they just need to get in because they have experience. And I think the same thing applies to hockey. So those teams like Tampa Bay, who after getting swept by Columbus, learned their lesson, and Boston or Washington or Pittsburgh, those teams can go very far because they have so much experience. Whereas like the Floridas and the Carolinas, as much as I love to see those smaller teams win, I don't know if their fate is really to make a deep run, unfortunately. But I hope, again, too, that I eat my words and that a smaller team actually ends up having a lot of success and or winning it all, because the story with St. Louis winning was tremendous. I didn't want to see a team win that had won many times before, especially in Tampa Bay, like them winning always on the heels of someone else's heartbreak. Like it's really tough to see that. But hey, the circle of parity will make its rounds one way or another.
And I agree. And you know what? Honestly, Tampa and Boston, I agree. I could see them doing very well in the playoffs. Boston for sure. Boston's always a playoff team, and it's frustrating as a Flyers fan because they always end up playing the Flyers, it seems. And I always find the Flyers have the hardest playoff format because I'm biased, but they always have to play a Pittsburgh, Washington, or Boston in the first 2 rounds. In my experience of playoffs, I guess I should say. And that's frustrating because those 3 teams are playoff built teams. They have so much experience in the playoffs and the postseason. They're strong, and they're deep. They have players with a lot of experience. So I agree. I can see Boston or Tampa really, same thing. Tampa just needed to get in. They didn't need to be first seed again this year and prove something after being back-to-back champs. They just needed to get in, and I can still see them somehow. If somebody told me that Tampa won this cup a 3rd year in a row, I would not be shocked because they have a good team still.
Yeah, 100%. And if they won back-to-back, what's stopping them from winning a 3rd?
Surely. It'd be fun to see. You know what? I'm not against Tampa. I like Tampa, so.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see for the NHL playoffs. And that's when all the cards will fall and the things will shake out. And there's a tiny little animal that is so cute that you just picked up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my cat doesn't like to ever be left alone, so he's joining the conversation now.
Oh, no, please. I was literally just going to ask you about the mug because I see that you.
Oh, I have cats all over my mug. Yeah. This was actually a graduation present for university. So.
And I know that sometimes when it comes to hard news and telling stories, sometimes you say, oh, like talking about animals, like what's that? But I always find that, you know, James Duthie, he brought up one of his little French bulldogs, and I was like, please, like you can bring the animal into the shot. Rob, he brought his lovely dog Candy into the shot. I'm like, if you have beautiful animals you can bring into the shot, there's never anything wrong with that, because I'm always one for seeing cute animals on the screen, especially when it comes to people who do reporting from home. Those are the funny moments that I think we appreciate as viewers when we're in the midst of a pandemic or when people are in these funny scenarios.
I agree, all the lighthearted stuff. And that's the thing with people working at home. It's constantly like kids or animals in their shots. So yeah. And he's literally my kid, so he's always in it.
That's the only cat you have?
Yeah, well, I had 2 cats when I was in university, but they obviously lived with my parents. And then, you know, I was moving post-university, and I didn't really want to bring them with me while I was figuring out my life. And then I felt like they have like a bigger house living at my parents' place, and I was like, I don't want to move them into a smaller space because they have like a castle at my parents' house. And that my parents were like, well, you could take one, but I can't separate them because they're best friends. So then I just got my own kitty just recently. So I just got Madden in January.
And is that in honor of the late John Madden?
It was. I got him right after John Madden had passed away. I had no name picked out, but we usually do sports names for our pets. And so when John Madden passed away, I was like, well, that's an easy one. He's my little boy. And yeah.
Well, that's the perfect name for an animal that is paying homage to one of the greatest to ever do it as a head coach in the NFL and also as a broadcaster too.
Yeah, we were actually making a joke about John Madden today because we were talking about people who are afraid to fly. And then we brought up John Madden in his bus.
He was afraid to fly. I thought he just had the bus because it was just cool and it was him. I actually didn't know it was because he was afraid to fly.
Well, I think he just refused to fly. He might have been afraid to fly. I might have misinterpreted that. I feel like I've read so much on it and now I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, there was a refusal to kind of fly, and that's why he did his bus. So it's really neat.
Yeah, that's his style. So I think that there's nothing wrong with it, and it's now lives on, and people can, you know, appreciate it as an artifact of NFL history.
I was gonna say he's definitely one of the greats in the NFL, or a name that'll go down in history that people will always talk about, which is awesome because he's the type of guy who should be talked about for generations to come.
So Brit, we're getting towards the end of our time on today's episode. So what I want to do is something actually that I've not tried before, but a word association game. So I say a word And I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind and what you think of when you hear it.
Oh gosh.
Doesn't matter what it is. Like when I say the word, it could be name of a player or a team or a year or whatever. And you just say what comes to mind immediately.
Okay. Oh gosh. Okay.
Okay. So the first word I have for you is Labor Day, or first phrase, Labor Day Classic.
Ooh. Oh yeah. I guess September. I don't know. Is that it? Because it's always the first weekend in September.
The Labor Day Classic, I guess the game, like what makes what
Oh, I thought I had to give just a word. Okay, so what do I give?
Yeah, or what do you think of when you hear
what do I
the
think
term
of?
Labor Day
Okay.
Classic?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like I can like paint a picture of just like probably one of the last weekends you're gonna have nice weather in Saskatchewan and rivalry and just I don't know, it's a game that you could tell me we lose every game all season, but as long as we win that one, that was always kind of as a Rider fan, you beat the Bombers. That's always the classic, beat the Bombers.
Weston Dressler.
Oh, I think of all Dressler chips. He was one of my favorite riders growing up in my era. And they used to do, like for their marketing team, had created that once, I think it was the season they won the Grey Cup. I don't know, I can't remember. But yeah, there was these chips, all Dressler chips. And we used to buy them. And Fantu's Flakes, Randy Fantu's. I remember those ones too. I can't remember if they were any good, but that's what I always think of when I think of him.
13th man.
Well, I think of my heartbreak in 08, being at that Grey Cup game. And I don't know if my dad cried, but I feel like I've never seen my dad cry, but I feel like a tear might have come out of his eye that day.
Gritty.
Ooh, best mascot in sports. Probably the only thing the Flyers have going for them right now.
Claude Giroux.
Oh, heartbreak because now he's not a Flyer anymore. And I really wanted to see him win a cup with the Flyers. There's been 2 trades that I think I've cried over, and one was Simone Gagne, my favorite Flyer of all time. And that one, I got a little emotional, especially because he ended on his 1,000th game with the Flyers this season and the tribute and everything. Everybody kind of knew he was going to leave. So, but I'm excited to watch him with Florida in the playoffs. So at least I get to watch him in the playoffs.
Sidney Crosby.
Oh, that one hurts. I mean, my family's always like anti-Sidney Crosby. I'm not going to say the guy doesn't have talent, but we always call him like crybaby or like whiner. But I do think about one of the years when the Flyers were playing the Penguins in the playoffs. He had said something like, I don't like any of them. And he was talking about the fans, the Flyers, everything, the organization, the city. And he'd said, I don't like any of them. And the Flyers they still always make shirts in the playoffs for fans every game. And they put a different saying on them every game. And the one said, guess what? We don't like you either. And I remember that and every fan was wearing it when they came back for whatever game it was. I think they ended up losing that series though. So maybe it was a curse. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they beat them in one series in the playoffs in recent memory, but other than that, it's not been a good time, unfortunately.
It's been a tough one, yeah.
For Philadelphia fans. 2010. What sports memories do you have the most from 2010?
Well, I would say yes, definitely the cup run. I feel bad bringing it up so many times, so people are going to be like, move on, they didn't even win. But it's all I have as a Flyers fan to hold on to. So heartbreak, but that was such an amazing Flyers team. That might be one of the best teams that I'll ever see, just with Jeff Carter and Mike Richards. And I mean, Giroux was even on that team. He was such a young guy at that time. So yeah, that was a good team.
The Boston Red Sox.
Ooh, I would love to go to Fenway, even though, again, I'm anti-Boston for any team. But I will say that one of my goals is to go to Fenway. So I don't know. I feel like, again, a very big rivalry in sports. So the Phillies, but I'll try not to talk too bad.
Now, for the final part, what I want to do is ask some wrap-up questions to have a little bit more fun before we part for today. And I did think that went pretty well. I don't think any were stumpers. So now for the final part, who is your favorite Saskatchewan Roughrider of all time?
Oh, like I said, I think Weston Dressler. And I mean, it's not really anything to do with, I was so young, so I didn't really understand the game as much. Same thing when you just talk about players off the field and how you're rooting for him. or them. And I don't know, I guess I just always, we were big Dressler fans in my family. You know, I think my dad had, like, that was one of the jerseys he had of the million that he has. And I don't know, it was just something you know, Getzlaf too was a big part of that. And Getzlaf also obviously has a connection to his brother in hockey. And so that family was always somebody that you know, or a group that you paid attention to. So that Don Narcisse actually is my dad's, I think, all-time favorite rider. And that was who my very first cat was named after, Narco. So Don Narcisse holds a place in my heart. I never watched him play, but he's an amazing human. So great guy. And I don't know. I don't even know if I can answer that. I feel like there's so many.
Who is your favorite athlete that played for a team that you do not cheer for?
Ooh. Well, I guess I kind of cheer for the Flames. I was going to say Jerome McGinley or Lanny McDonald, but I kind of like the Flames. Mike Fisher. I always liked the style of play Mike Fisher had, even when he played in Ottawa and then obviously went to Nashville. But I would say probably him. I've really enjoyed watching him when he was playing. And when he retired, I was kind of sad. And then when he came out of retirement for that half a season, I thought, oh my gosh, Nashville's going to get it this year. And I felt like I was always kind of rooting for him with Nashville. And I'm sad that they couldn't pull it out for him because I felt like he was somebody who deserved a cup.
Of these three major championship events, which would you rather be at? A World Series game, the Super Bowl, or a Stanley Cup Finals game?
Oh.
And in the case of the MLB and the NHL, they're series deciding games. So it puts it on the same level of stakes with the Super Bowl.
Okay. Maybe the World Series, honestly. I don't know. Something about the World Series the last few years has really, really gotten me. The Super Bowl I like, but I like sitting and watching the Super Bowl with like friends and family because you get to watch the performance and everybody's having a good time. Whereas I feel like, yes, if you were at it, the atmosphere would be phenomenal. But I don't know, when you're with a really good group of people, everybody's always into Super Bowl Sunday. It's always such a big event to hang out with people and go watch it somewhere. So I almost feel like I could miss out on it. So yeah, maybe World Series.
My final question for you is, who is a broadcaster or someone in the sports industry that you have looked up to and or still look up to this day?
Ooh, that's a really good one. When I first got into broadcasting in college, I remember they asked in our interview this question to get into the program. And at that time, I'd said Leah Hextall, because obviously Hextall is a very famous name in the Flyers organization and was. And so, you know, and she has done a lot, especially recently. I know she's taken a lot of heat lately, and I know that's tough. And I know females take it a little bit more in this industry, but she's somebody who rolls with the punches, my goodness. So I still look up to her. I still think she works very hard. And I mean, I've seen that. I was able to meet her one time randomly in Brandon, Manitoba. We were at the same bar and she was a sweetheart. She was an angel and she was so good to me. And I was only like a year into the industry. And I went up to her and I told her that. I said, hey, when I got into this industry, I said, I want to be like Leah Hextall. And she just treated me like a regular human. She didn't look down on me. And I don't know. So I've always appreciated that. So I guess her.
Well, there's one thing for certain. Leah is built Brandon tough, and people from Brandon are as tough as they come. So she definitely carries a lot of pride in where she's from. And especially when you think back to the history of, you know, Philadelphia success and her being linked to, you know, successful people in terms of the Flyers organization, and then being from Manitoba, it definitely is something that I think gives her a lot of brownie points in my eyes for sure. But I also know that she's done a lot of good work and continues to roll with the punches like the Broad Street Bullies and like, you know, people who are from Brandon, Manitoba. So that's definitely, I was thinking you would probably say that because I know that it's like she's associated with the Flyers, she's in broadcasting, you know, she's from the prairies, but I mean, what's not to love about her character for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that outshines everything. And I mean, she keeps rolling and she's going to do well, and she's already successful. And I can imagine she's going to be even more successful. So her, I mean, if any other, I mean, who's not going to answer Erin Andrews if you're a female sportscaster, but she's just so lovable on every level. So her too.
And maybe someday that you will be able to be that person who someone says, yes, I want to be exactly like Brit Dort, because you never know. It all starts somewhere. And I think that's it is an important thing to carry forth in the industry, and especially if you're a woman in the industry, to reflect and say like, well, if someone inspired me, then who may I inspire? So Leah's definitely, that's what makes me think of when you mentioned Leah, because she's someone who stands not necessarily alone, but in a small circle of people in terms of what she does in hockey.
I absolutely agree. Well, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be somebody who others look up to, but if they do, God bless them. Thank them.
Brit, with that, I want to thank you for having been on today's episode. It was super, super fantastic getting to chat with you. I'm really glad that we got to chop it up about sports fandoms and as well relive some unfortunate heartbreaks, but also relish in some of the great successes that your teams have had, because I think that's an important thing about being a sports fan, as well to chat about how you got into the industry and to continue to observe the path that you project yourself to be on. It was just really a pleasure.
Well, that is so sweet of you. Well, thank you so, so much. I appreciate it. And you broke my broadcast or my podcast little thing. Like, I've never done this before. So I appreciate that you took my first podcast.
Thank you to the listener as well for enjoying today's episode with CTV live reporter from Regina for sports, Brit Dort.